So way back when, like I think it's even the late 70s or early 80s, I started to hear these stories, these Darwin Award stories related, and as the internet grew, they became kind of one of the more vibrant parts of that medium, as they bestowed an annual award on people who sort of befell the most ridiculous fate, I guess, you know. And I was always fascinated, not so much because of the mayhem that occurred, but like the why behind why people did these things. And when I was a young guy, my father was obsessed with driving. I drove cross country like 14 times. You know, and the first time I did it alone, he gave me a '63 Chrysler when I was 16 years old, and this 300 horsepower car, and I drove cross country alone. And there was something that seemed particularly American about these stories, and that also struck a chord. Sort of the kind of ridiculous testosterone and poetry you find in like American power ballads was, you know, resonated through these strange stories, you know, and there's something very human and beautiful and funny about them, and I always wondered why nobody had made a film about them, and it kind of reverberated in my head for years, and then I sort of kind of created these characters who didn't, you know, like Burroughs, Joe Fiennes' characters, doesn't necessarily have a lot of poetry in his soul to begin with, so I think he's drawn to it, you know, not only because of the poetry involved in it, but because of his own fears. Again, we had the script, and we had just begun the process of starting to go out to people, and when I found out she was interested, my jaw dropped, and I thought that she would be brilliant for it, and when we met, we just really, you know, connected, and her being from the Bay Area, and I also thought it was a kind of role I hadn't seen Winona in. Winona has such a youthful appearance that even when she was in her 20s, she's kind of had this appearance of somebody who was in her teens, and Siri is a real woman, you know, and I just was excited by the idea of Winona Ryder playing that kind of character, and she's also one of those rare people, and I can say this from having worked with many amazing actors, that is just transformed on the screen. She becomes this larger-than-life image on screen. It's very hard to describe, and she's also one of the smartest actors I've ever run across, if not the smartest. She just really knows her stuff. She knows literature inside and out, and just great, really great person. It was great, you know, once Winona Ryder came on the project, you know, there were certain changes that happened in the third act. We both have our roots in the Bay Area, and she was very instrumental in a lot of the, you know, her family was always great friends with a lot of the people in the Beat scene. You know, I think godfather was Timothy Leary, and she's also very close to, you know, Allen Ginsberg and, you know, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who ultimately appeared in the film. And before I became a screenwriter, I ran the literary series at Intersection of the Arts, and kind of poetry was my thing. So I was really happy to have North Beach and City Lights, you know, feature prominently in the third act, you know, kind of as a way of bringing it back to the degree, you know, the literary or aspect and or apocryphal aspect of the Darwin Award. Some of them are totally true, some are partially true, some are untrue. So I kind of was excited by that also. Burroughs is on his own a bit. He's an isolated person, and I thought, you know, rather than having too much voiceover, it would be a great way of getting into the character's head. And we all have sort of a second character talking at us and asking us questions we don't want to answer and pointing out things we don't want really pointed out. And I thought the cameraman was kind of like a nice kind of physicalization of that voice that many of us have in our heads, at least that I do. You know, well, you know, thinking about a character like David Arquette's character, what makes somebody put a military rocket onto a car? What makes somebody want to go 400 miles an hour? You know, or the determination of these guys dying to break into a Metallica concert. You know, to what extent they're willing to go to. To me that's poetry, you know, and it's kind of like when we went to the moon. When man went to the moon, they justified it through science and what we would find. And so, you know, bottom line is people wanted to touch this thing they'd been seeing in the sky for millions of years, you know, not really for any scientific results. It ultimately was a poetic act. A lot of people feel faceless and powerless, and I see a lot of these reactions of people, you know, kind of screaming out or breaking out against that kind of anonymity that's befelled upon them by this culture.